but we're almost home. Mr. Pugliese, I want to ask you, this hearing today comes at a most appropriate time because we are suffering from supply chain issues in our country. Whereas I think we can resolve these in the near term, I think it's a different story about the long term, particularly when it relates to when we're talking about supply chain of critical minerals. And I know we've spoken about that today, you have, but if all this were to go through, all these priorities and these with the Green New Deal and everything, knowing how dependent we are on China, knowing how dependent we are on other countries to get these minerals, and knowing how long it takes to be able to get them here in this country, if we were to be able to process them and to be able to get the minerals here, what's the repercussions, both politically and economically, if we become so dependent on China for our critical minerals, if we're almost completely dependent on them for this?
Well, we're all going to suffer a strategic loss if the components we need to transition to the fuels or the technologies of the future are in regions in which are unfriendly or subject to disruption. If you think about the traditional way we thought about energy security, we were vulnerable in the from petroleum due to a concentration of low-cost reserves in unstable parts of the world, right? That imposed two risks on us. One, a few folks could get together and lower production and extract wealth from the United States. Or two, right, there could be a major disruption. It doesn't even have to be state actor. It could just be acts of terrorism. But we were so dependent on that. And the emergence of the U.S. as a major oil producer in the world has virtually eliminated this problem. Yes, other players can do things. And this is the problem if we try to transition too fast and too deep with these alternative fuels.
Thank you for mentioning that. I often cite just what you said. You're old enough, I'm old enough to remember the late 70s when we were dependent on other countries, particularly the Middle East, for our energy needs. And we knew it, but we realized it when gasoline got up to be $5 or $6 a gallon. And we did something about it. We set out to become energy independent, and we achieved that. We even achieved energy dominance. And I remember our former Secretary of the State, Mike Pompeo, saying that it was such a tool in his tool chest when he could go worldwide, knowing that we had energy dominance. It gave us something that other people didn't have, and that we could utilize on a foreign playing field, if you will, and how important that was. I want to get to something else because I'm really interested in this, and that is just how clean some of this stuff is. When we talk about clean energy, what about the waste? And the title of today's hearing is Clean Energy Economy. But in your testimony, you mentioned the high cost of materials and commodities needed to build enough clean energy projects that could replace the output of a natural gas plant. In fact, according to the Manhattan Institute, the energy equivalent of 100 barrels of oil is used in the processes to fabricate a single battery that can store the equivalent of one barrel of oil. How much cleaner are wind, solar, and battery technology when they require so much more in terms of materials, processing, and land?
Right. So one of the problems is we have kind of a unidimensional view towards the environment. Everything is focused on carbon emissions, and we forget about all the other things we need to worry about, which is land disturbance, how much land we're going to need, how much power and energy needs to be made to fabricate the steel for the windmills. And I'd like to thank Mark Mills for his excellent analysis of this problem, because there are no free lunches.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you mentioning this. I represent South Georgia, a very rural area, and I've visited some counties where the state and federal government are offering tax incentives for them to switch from farmland to solar farms. And let me preface and say, look, I'm a big clean energy advocate. I'm very proud that I just received an award as a conservative clean energy Person of the Year in Georgia, and I take it very seriously, and I'm all for clean energy, but I also want to be accurate, and I also want to make sure we understand. But what I was saying, some of these counties, we're using up ag land for solar farms. And some counties have even put moratoriums on it now because all of the ag land's being turned into solar farms.
Well, if we're using a set of price signals which don't reflect the actual costs of production and the actual value of the products, we're going to have these distortions. And so we should be cautious and careful about the pace at which we do these things.
Again, I thank you all for being here. I just want to make clear, and I'm a strong advocate for clean energy, but I want us to go with our eyes open on it and make sure we understand just how clean it is. Thank you, and I'll yield back.